This is the second of the guerrilla warfare basics. This is doctrinal stuff on guerrilla warfare. This particular entry is from Communist China in the 1930s. Basic Tactics by Mao Tse Tung, written in 1937, or at least that's what the website said. This is Chapter 2, Tactics. There are 18 points in here, with the 16th one being very, very long. The others not nearly as bad. I will read you this second chapter, and I will mention any notes, but there are notes on this stuff all the way through it. So we'll see if I have anything to add on this stuff or a little bit better explanations. First off, there's kind of a foreword on this. At a time when our country's national defense preparation are not completed and when our weapons are inferior to the excellent equipment with which the enemy has provided himself, we must observe the following principles whenever we wish to wage a battle with the enemy. Number 1, precautions when on the march. When we are on the march, we must send plainclothes units armed with pistols ahead of our vanguard, behind our rear guard, and to the side of our lateral defenses in order to spy out situation, to forestall unexpected attacks by the enemy or superfluous clashes. Pretty straightforward. Send scouts out ahead of the forward security elements of your flank securities and your rear security. Recommended, plain clothes so they blend in with the population. They won't be noticed as much. That plain clothes security element will then report to your security, either your lead scouts, your trail scouts, or your flank scouts. Let them know what's going on, and then those scouts radio it into the main body so that you can react accordingly. Number 2, precautions during halts. When we encamp, if there is a presumption that the enemy may be near, we should send every day a guerrilla company or at least a platoon towards the enemy defenses to carry out reconnaissance at a distance from 20 to 30 li, or to join up with the local forces and carry out propaganda among the masses in order to inspire them to resist the enemy. If this unit discovers the enemy, it should on one hand resist him and on the other report to us so that we can prepare to meet the foe or to retreat without being drawn into an unnecessary battle. Basically, you put in an encampment, you're trying to rest for a period of time. You still need to send out patrols. If those patrols encounter an enemy force, they need to report it back. Hopefully they are able to disengage without there being any type of firefight, without being seen. But if one happens, they fight, they do their breaking contact, and then they report back the information, salute report format, to the main body so that they can react accordingly. Measures of distance, I will say this, when you read through this, it measures in li, which is a Chinese measure of distance. Think of it, my guess is, as probably kilometers. The way this book is written up, it's written for a larger force, so we're thinking of the Red Army as a whole, so it's probably written in the perspective of division or larger in strength. But obviously, scale it down for smaller units. Most guerrilla units, resistance units, I have a feeling would be at most company size, maybe a few would be battalion in size. So scale down accordingly. Number 3, we must not attack strong positions. If the enemy guards his position firmly or defends a strong strategic point, then, unless we have special guarantees of success, we must not attack him. If we attack him, we will waste considerable time, and our losses in killed and wounded will certainly be many times those of the enemy. Moreover, in guerrilla warfare, our artillery is not strong. If we recklessly attack a strong position, it will be very difficult to take it rapidly at one stroke, and meanwhile, it will be easy for the enemy to gather his forces from all sides and surround us. At this point, the army and the people must be absolutely firm of purpose, cannot act recklessly in a disorderly fashion because of a moment's anger. Pretty straightforward. If the enemy's dug in defense, they're strong. Don't attack it in force. Attack them in small numbers. Get inside. Think of along the lines of what the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese did to attack U.S. and ARVN fire bases in Vietnam. Instead of attacking them en masse, lines of infantry assaulting the perimeters, they snuck in, created a breach point, and exploited it. Don't waste your forces by doing a very ill-advised frontal attack on an enemy strong point. You're just going to waste your troops, you're just going to waste your supplies, and you're going to lose valuable weapons. Number 4, do not fight hard battles. If we do not have a 100% guarantee of victory, we should not fight a battle. For it is not worthwhile to kill 1,000 of the enemy and lose 800 killed among ourselves, especially in guerrilla warfare, such as we are waging. It is difficult to replace men, horses, and ammunition. If we fight a battle and lose many men and horses and much ammunition, this must be considered a defeat for us. Basically, a Pyrrhic victory. You destroyed the enemy, but in the same vein, you've destroyed yourselves. So then at the end, who truly won that battle? You may have won that engagement, but in the ultimate end, your enemy's able to bring in more people, and you're not. Number 5, we must not fight if the situation of the enemy is not clear. When we are encamped in a certain place and suddenly discover the enemy but are not informed regarding his numbers or where he is coming from, we must absolutely not fight, but must resolutely retreat several tens of li. It is only if we are right up against the enemy that we should send covering units. For if the enemy comes to attack, it is certainly because his forces are superior or he has a plan, and we must under no circumstances fall into his trap. If the enemy is in force, it is obviously advantageous to retreat. If his numbers are small and we retreat, nothing more than a little extra fatigue is involved, and there will always be time to return and attack him again later. Pretty straightforward. If your enemy is attacking you, he believes he has the advantage. So melt away. Let him attack into an area, think he's won the ground, and then once he pulls back, that's when you reoccupy that area or you start attacking him as he's pulling out. Basic guerrilla tactic. Number 6, we must organize the masses and unite with them. Modern warfare is not a matter in which armies alone can determine victory or defeat, especially in guerrilla combat. We must rely on the force of the popular masses, for it is only thus that we can have a guarantee of success. The support of the masses offers us great advantages as regards transport, assistance to wounded, intelligence, disruption of the enemy's position, etc. At the same time, the enemy can be put into an isolated position, thus further increasing our advantages. If, by misfortune, we are defeated, it will also be possible to escape or to find concealment. Consequently, we must not lightly give battle in places where the masses are not organized and linked to us. You need to have good relations with the public. That's something that I've mentioned quite a few times. The fence sitters need to be on the side of the guerrilla. They're more likely to help them out. Give them food, help out with the wounded. Maybe something as simple as, hey, they got a truck, they're going towards town, they let a bunch of you guys jump in back, but you got to jump out of the truck, say a kilometer out from the town. Either way, it's helping you, getting you close to your objective. You need the support of the people. If they turn against you, they will report you to the enemy, and you're going to have a very bad day. Number 7, using the masses to make a surprise attack and break a blockade. When the enemy surrounds us and blockades us, we should rouse the popular masses and cut the enemy's communications in all directions, so that he does not know that our army is already near him. Then we should take advantage of a dark night or of a light of the dawn to attack and disperse him. Basically, they're talking about getting, you have your guerrilla force, they're surrounded by the enemy, they can't get through to escape or to attack or to move to a better position. Getting the people riled up to cause issues, maybe draw off the enemy forces, allowing you to move through. This is very common, you see in communist versions of guerrilla warfare, of using unarmed civilians to your advantage or to their advantage. I don't really recommend that for us, but who knows, maybe using them to start a protest and that type of stuff will draw forces away. Maybe if you get a big protest going on in one community, they'll draw troops in to react to those protests, to that little uprising, which will allow you to move through an area or to conduct an operation in a particular location, like attacking a particular combat outpost for supplies, taking it out while their quick reaction force is involved in another community, trying to put down an uprising of the civilians. Number 8, surprise attacks on isolated units. When we have reconnoitered the enemy's position and have kept our men at a distance of several li, and when he has unquestionably relaxed his precautions, then we advance rapidly with light equipment before dawn when the enemy does not expect us and exterminate him. Pretty straightforward. Attack an enemy position that's isolated and smaller in number. Number 9, using the popular masses to harry the enemy. On the basis of a decision by the main force of the army, in time of battle, we send out part of our forces divided into several units, the smallest element being a platoon, to lead the local militia, police, volunteer army, or other popular masses of the peasantry and the workers. These groups use a great variety of flags, occupy mountaintops or villages and market towns, use brass gongs, spears, rudimentary cannon, swords and spikes, trumpets, etc. They scatter all over the landscape and yell, thus distracting the enemy's eyes and ears. Or, both night and day on all sides, they shoot off isolated shots to cause panic among enemy soldiers and fatigue their spirit. Then, afterward, our army appears in full strength when the enemy does not expect it and disperses him by a flank attack. Basically, keeping your enemy on edge. Moving into an area, spreading out, making it harder for the enemy to pin you down, using assistance from the local population to do basic sabotage and harassment. Like it says, the occasional sniper shot to put the enemy on edge, the occasional IED, the occasional timed rocket attack in the middle of the night to get them woken up, having to run to the bunkers for a few hours till the attack's done, and then you launch another rocket from somewhere, have them do the same thing all over again, get them fatigued, get them worn out. Number 10. circling around to get away from the enemy. When we are faced with a large enemy force and do not have sufficient strength to meet its attack, we use the method of circling around. We hasten to a place where there are no enemy troops, and we use mountain trails so that the enemy cannot catch up with us. At the same time, along the way, we utilize the popular masses, getting them to carry out reconnaissance work in the front and the rear so that we are not attacked by the enemy in either direction. You avoid the enemy's strength. You move around in areas that's more advantageous to you than the enemy, and you get information from the locals as to the enemy's location, their strength, and what they're doing at the time. That's where your militia auxiliaries really come into play. Number 11, getting out of difficult situations. Presume that in the rear there is a pursuing army and in the front an obstacle, or that the pursuing army is too strong for us. As a plan to get out of such a difficult situation, we can send a part of our forces 4 or 5 li off to lure the enemy up a big road, while our main force follows a side road and escapes the enemy. Or we can make a detour around the enemy's rear and attack him there by surprise. Or we can use the local militia and the police to go along another route, leaving some objects, making footprints in the road, sticking up notices, etc., so as to induce the enemy to follow them. Then our main force suddenly rushes out from a side road, striking at the enemy from the front and the rear, encircle him on all sides, and annihilate him. Basically, you're using a diversionary force to draw your enemy off to think you're going one particular route, when in actuality your main force is going on another route. And then, when the situation allows for it, you attack the enemy and take them out. Number 12, cause an uproar in the east, strike in the west. When the army wants to attack a certain place, it does not advance there directly, but makes a detour by some other place and then changes its course in the midst of its march in order to attack and disperse the enemy. The thunderclap leaves no time to cover one's ears. Make it look like you're going one direction, you do a quick change of direction, and hit your enemy when they least expect it. Number 13, concealed attacks from ambush. When the enemy is pursuing us in great haste, we select a spot for an ambush and wait until he arrives. Thus we can capture the enemy all at one stroke. We're luring the enemy out, they're following behind us, we drop off an ambush party and they wait a set amount of time. That enemy force that's pursuing us walks right into the ambush, you take them out, and then that ambushing force rejoins your main body. Number 14, ambushing the enemy in the course of a march. Interesting. When we learn from reconnaissance that the enemy plans to advance from a certain point, we choose a spot where his path is narrow and passes through confusing mountainous terrain, and send a part of our troops or a group of our sharpshooters to lie hidden in the mountains bordering his path, or in the forest, to wait until his main force is passing through. Then we throw rocks down on his men from the mountains and rake them with bullets, or shoot from ambush at their commanding officers mounted on horseback. Straightforward, same thing. They concealed attacks from ambush and ambushing the enemy in the course of a march. Both those 2 points are pretty close together. Number 15, make a strong defense by emptying the countryside. When our spies have informed us that the enemy is about to arrive, and if our forces is not sufficient to give battle, we should then carry out the stratagem of making a strong defense by emptying the countryside. We hide the food, stores, fuel, grain, pots and other utensils, etc. in order to cut off the enemy's food supply. Moreover, as regards the popular masses of the area in question, with the exception of old men, women, and children who are left behind to provide reconnaissance information, we lead all able-bodied men to hiding places. Thus, the enemy has no one to serve as porters, guides, and scouts. At the same time, we send a few men to the enemy's rear communications lines to cut off his supplies, capture his couriers, and cut or sabotage his communications facilities. Remember, this is written at a time where armies primarily supplied themselves off of what they found in the countryside as they were moving through. So they hid the food, they hid the stores, they hid even the cooking utensils so that the enemy troops could not supply themselves. Modern armies, they bring their food in with them. So figure out something. If the enemy is supplying themselves off local stores that are also used by civilians, deny that to the enemy. If they're taking fuel stores from the civilians, deny that to the enemy. Now the big one. Meeting a superior enemy. And this one is so long, I don't think I'm really going to give any explanations on this. I'm just going to read it to you. First point. When the enemy advances, we retreat. If the enemy forces were weaker than ours, he would not dare advance and attack us. So when he advances towards us, we can conclude that the enemy is certainly coming with superior force and is acting according to plan and with preparation. It is therefore appropriate for us to evade his vanguard by withdrawing beforehand. If we meet with the enemy in the course of our march and either do not have clear information regarding him or know that his army is stronger than ours, we should, without the slightest hesitation, carry out a precautionary withdrawal. As to the place to which we should withdraw, it is not appropriate to go long distances, the main roads, so that the enemy follows us to the end. We should move along sinuously in the nearby area, winding around in circles. If the enemy appears ahead of us, we should circle around to his rear. If the enemy is on the mountains, we should descend into the valleys. If the enemy is in the middle, we should retreat on the two sides. If the enemy is on the left bank of a river, we should retreat on the right bank. If the enemy is on the right bank, we should retreat on the left bank. Moreover, in withdrawing, when we come to a crossroads, we can deliberately leave some objects in the branch of the road we do not take, or send a small fraction of our men and horses that way in order to leave some tracks or written symbols. Or we can write some distinguishing marks on the road we do take to indicate that it is closed. Thus we induce the enemy to direct his pursuit and attack in the wrong direction. At such times it is best to evacuate the popular masses and such armed forces as the militia, police, the voluntary army, etc., by various routes in all directions, in order to confuse the enemy's eyes and ears. We can leave behind part of our men who bury their uniforms and weapons and disguise themselves as merchants, street vendors, etc. They spread rumors and pretend to be obliging in order to spy out information regarding the enemy's numbers, his plans, the location and routine of his camps, and the precautions he is taking. If the enemy questions them about the direction in which we have withdrawn and the strength of our force, they should talk incoherently, pointing to the east and saying the west, pointing to the south and saying north, replacing big by small and small by big, talking at random and creating rumors. They wait until our army is about to attack, and then they dig up their uniforms and put them on, take up their weapons and attack the enemy from his midst, thus completely routing him and leaving him with nowhere to turn. Second point, when the enemy retreats, we pursue. When the enemy army retreats, it is appropriate to take advantage of the situation to advance. On such an occasion, the enemy's military situation must have undergone a change. Otherwise, he would not have retreated, and he is certainly not prepared to join battle against us with any resolution. If we take advantage of the situation and make a covering attack on his rear, the enemy's covering units will certainly not be resolved to fight, and in the context of the enemy's overall plan, it will be difficult for his forward units to return and join in the fray. In rough mountainous terrain where the paths are narrow and rivers and streams intertwined so that there are many bridges, even if the enemy's forward forces were to turn back, this move would require much time. So by the time he turns back, his rear will already have been annihilated and he will already have been disarmed. At this time, the organizations of the popular masses should devise methods for destroying bridges on the route over the enemy is retreating, or cutting the lines of his communication systems. Or, best of all, they should wait until the bulk of the enemy's armies have retreated and, taking advantage of the protection afforded by our guards and army, block the enemy's path of retreat so that although his forces may want to turn back, they cannot do it, and although they yearn for help, they cannot obtain it. But at such a time, the most important task of the popular masses is to spy out the direction in which the enemy is withdrawing, in order to ascertain whether or not there may be an ambush or a feigned retreat intended to encircle us from two sides, and report to us immediately so that our army can pluck up courage and pursue the enemy or devise a method of evading him. Third point. When the enemy halts, we harass him. When the enemy is newly arrived in our territory, is not familiar with the terrain, does not understand the local dialect, and is unable to gain any information from the scouts he sends out, it is as though he had encountered a distant and inaccessible land. At such a time, we should increase our harassment, shooting off guns everywhere to make him ill at ease day and night, so exercising a great influence on both his mind and body under such circumstances. I fear that any army, however overbearing, will begin to waver and will become weary. We need only wait the time when his spirits are wavering and his body weary, and then if our armies rush in all together, we can certainly exterminate him completely. That principle was extremely long, so I'm not going to go back and add anything to it. Read into it and interpret it where you will. Number 17, dealing with a weak enemy. Fighting as we are for the existence of our nation and the achievement of the aims of guerrilla warfare, which are to destroy the enemy and to stir up the courage of the popular masses. When we are faced with a weak enemy, naturally we should unite with the popular masses of the place in question to surround him and exterminate him at one stroke. If you have a smaller enemy force that's occupying a particular area, if you're some type of main force unit, you're moving around, meet up with the local units in that area, the smaller units that are only covering, say, that town, that county, that parish, whatever it may be. Meet up with them, combine your strengths, exterminate this small enemy force. And hopefully it's not a trap designed to pull you in for a larger force to take you out. Number 18, arousing the masses. There are always a good many among the popular masses who forget the great cause for the sake of petty advantage. Frequently having received great favors from the enemy, they act contrary to conscience and aid the forces of evil. For this reason, before the arrival of the enemy in a given place, we must do our utmost to whip up the spirits of the popular masses, to rouse their will to resist, to endow them with an unshakable resolve to fight to the end, without seeking advantage, without compromise or surrender. We must induce them to follow our orders sincerely and to cooperate with our army to resist the enemy. At the same time, we should also organize resist the enemy associations, associations for national salvation, and other types of professional bodies to facilitate the transmission of orders and the evacuation of villages in times of necessity to clean out traitors and prevent their utilization by the enemy. Basically, remind the population why the fight's going on. Remind them of your heritage. Pride in what the founders have done. What they went through in their fight, how they persevered, and what they gave us. Reiterate that into the civilians. Also, inform them of what atrocities the enemy commits. That way, you get those fence sitters over to your side. You get their support, or at least deny their support to the enemy. You will have traitors that will arise in the civilian population. Deal with them as you will, what you think is appropriate. But whenever you do that, always make sure you have proof, not just hearsay, and that the punishment is appropriate. If one person is feeding information to the enemy, the only person that should be punished is that one person. Don't punish his family also. You know, if that one person is selling information, you don't take him and his entire family, put him up against a wall and shoot him. You just take out the one traitor. Well, that's part 2 on guerrilla warfare basics. This one was from Mao Tse Tung, considered to be the one of the founders of guerrilla doctrine whenever you check into it. So, now for all my engineer brothers and the Patriot and militia movements, always remember, Essayons.